I mean, maybe we'll start at the dam and we'll just drift down till, oh, what the? Hey, 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 hey. All right, Tackle Warehouse fans, out here in a really current-filled river, fishing a brand new crawl bait by Berkley called the Clatter Craw. This thing is different, unique from every other crawl out there, and it has sounds that it makes that really make these fish bite. So let's let this one go, and I want to show you this brand new Clatter Craw. All right, guys, there's a good look at it. This is the brand new Clatter Craw by Berkley. Of course, it is a power bait, but this isn't your ordinary crawl. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that makes this really unique. The first one is, if you look at the head, it actually comes with a molded head already built on the body. So this isn't the kind of crawl you have to thread on a jig head or put on a different piece of terminal tackle. It's already rigged for you. If you look at that head, it really has a crawl look, right? It's anatomically correct. It's got that shell-looking crawl look, but more than that, it has these broad shoulders. And if you've ever fished a football head jig, you know that broad shoulders means it has the ability to sort of crawl through cover, especially hard cover. So rock, gravel, clay, sand, those harder type bottoms, that thing's gonna be perfect. The next thing you're gonna see is this bait has a really unique weed guard or snag guard system on it. And if you look at it, what Berkley's done is they've put a piece of really heavy, like fluorocarbon nylon on there that acts as a loop. And when you look at it, it's really unique because as you drag it over stuff, right? Look, I'll do it with my hand. This could be a piece of brush, this could be a boulder. It's not gonna hook my hand, right? It goes right over. But when that fish bites down on it, look at how that piece of nylon or that little material just compresses and you catch that fish. So very unique weed guard system. But I really wanna get to the crawl itself. And the magic of this bait comes in its claws. When you talk about action, it has a pretty unique action compared to a standard crawl. It's a little bit wider, a little bit more unique. And then if you look on those pincers, it has molded rattle system. And you could hear that, it's got that clicking sound, right? And thus the name. And those rattles provide sound, and they also provide buoyancy. So as I'm dragging this along those hard bottoms, and I'm gonna fish it a couple different ways, we'll look at it in a second, those rattles are gonna click, they're gonna snap, and they're gonna float and stand up, right? Because they've got air in them. So you have that stand-up crawl design. This is definitely a bait that has a unique action and a unique sound. You could fish it behind regular crawls. You could fish it behind jigs, and it gives the fish a different presentation. I love the fact that I can take it out of the pack, I can tie it on, and I can fish it. Oh, another good smallmouth, guys. Look at that. Fish number 2 on that thing. And I want you to look at how that bait is sitting in his mouth. I mean, he is just hooked perfect in the corner of the mouth. And a lot of people are intimidated by that guard. But as you can see, that guard did its job. It kept me out of the rocks. It kept me out of the rubble, kept me out of the scattered brush out there. But yet that hook penetrated right in that fish's mouth. Besides that action, and remember, this crawl is a little different. It's got a little bit bigger action. Besides that action, this crawl has 2 unique features, and the one is this right here. A lot of sound, right? So it's got unique sound. And as that bait comes dragging along, remember that molded head? It's like a football head, so it's not gonna get snagged in that hard cover. But as it's dragging along and you hear those rattles clicking, but on the pause, those claws float up. And it's a really natural thing for these smallmouths to see a crawl in the defensive position, and that triggers a feeding response. And there's another nice smallmouth on that brand new Berkley crawl using the drift and drag method. I want to show you a little bit more on how I do that. All right, guys, we're using a technique, and it's especially effective in current. So if you're fishing a natural river, a tidal river, even a headwaters on a reservoir, this is a great technique, and it's called the drift and drag. And in the drift and drag technique, I'm actually using the natural current to drag this bait along the bottom. There's other baits you could use for this for sure. Regular football head jig, a Carolina rig, swim bait, there's some other baits. But this clatter craw is unique because it's got a couple features. So the one is, if you notice, I'm literally not using my trolling motor to move the boat except to keep my nose in the current. So I'm maintaining bottom contact. I'm watching that line to make sure it's on the bottom. If I feel it lift up off the bottom, I just give it a little more slack, let it get back down. And I'm using that trolling motor just to steer the bait. But if you look at my rod tip, you can see that thing, and it's literally bouncing along the bottom. It's hitting the rocks, it's hitting the rubble. If I feel that make contact with something really big, I'll actually lean to it a little bit, and that'll slow that drift down. So again, letting it maintain bottom contact, but I'm just using the natural current to bring me downstream. So the other thing I'm doing, because this bait has rattles built into the claws, these are molded into the claws, every once in a while, watch my rod tip, I just give it a little snap, and that's going to activate those claws and make those rattles just pop a little bit. So using the current to my advantage, using the trolling motor literally just to keep my nose up current, and it's helped me cover a lot of water and get some of those reaction strikes. You know, the other way I like to fish this clatter craw by Berkley is I call it snapping or popping it. I've heard it called snatching it, and it's a lot like when you're popping a tube. And you know, basically I'm trying to make this thing come alive on the bottom and jump up. And if you ever seen crawfish, when they get defensive or get scared, they make these little backward movements. So it's really to mimic that. So I make a long cast out to where I think those fish are, and I'm gonna let this clatter craw go to the bottom. I wanna make sure I'm watching my line. I'm watching. Boom. When the line bellows out, I know the clatter craw's on the bottom. Once it's on the bottom, I'll start kind of like a drag movement backward. But when I get to about 11 o'clock, I'm basically gonna snatch it once or twice, just really quick. So, tum, tum, tum. And then I'm gonna watch my line and let it fall and get back to the bottom. Once it hits, I'm gonna repeat it. I'm gonna drag it a little bit, and then I'm gonna just put in a couple little snaps. It's more subtle than stroking. If you're familiar with stroking a football jig or stroking a jig, it's more subtle than that. So they're just one or two little snaps back to the bottom and continue your drag. Here's the thing about this technique is every time you snap that or pop that, this crawl, you can imagine, is dragging on the bottom. And when you snap it or pop it, it's gonna lift off, and when it does that, it activates those claws. They start that bigger, wider movement, but then when you let it fall in a slack, it's falling back down to the bottom. Boom, it hits. Because those rattles are hollow, the claws float, and you begin your drag again. So the nice thing about this one is you can get a lot of fish that are lethargic, a lot of fish that are, you know, unresponsive to normal baits. You can make them react. So snapping or popping this clatter craw, another great technique for this new bait. All right, guys, the gear we're gonna use for the clatter craw by Berkley, honestly, is very similar to the exact gear you're gonna use for, say, a 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce skirted jig. So, you know, for this, out here today, we're using this drift and drag technique, I want a same rod that I'm going to use for, say, a football jig. So when we're talking about rods for jig fishing, it's a 7 to 7.2 medium heavy rod. Today we're more in open water. We're out here doing the drift and drag program around scattered rock. So I'm using probably my favorite rod for this when there's not a lot of thick cover. And this is the Abu Garcia brand new Ike Series 3.0, and it's the 7-foot medium heavy, right? So think about that in a rod, 7-foot, 7.2 medium heavy, because you want a little bit of tip, right? You want that tip for if you're snatching it or making long casts, but you want a lot of this rod to be backbone, right? So you want that medium heavy action. On reel, same thing, guys. The same exact reel you're already using for jig fishing, convert it over to the craw. I like a faster gear ratio, 7-to-1 or higher. This happens to be the brand new Ike Series by Abu Garcia, the 3.0 Revo. It's 7-to-1 gear ratio. It's perfect, because some of those bites you need to pick up the slack really quick. All right, last but not least, the absolute perfect line for this clatter craw is fluorocarbon. Straight fluorocarbon, guys. And the reason's simple. When I'm using the drift and drag, or if I'm snatching it or popping it off the bottom, I really want this jig to stay on the bottom. Even when I'm lifting it, I want it falling back down and staying on the bottom. I also want maximum action. To get that, you want a heavy, dense line. So straight fluorocarbon does that perfectly. Generally, I'm fishing 12 to 20 pound tests, but what I'm using today, and this is my favorite line for this claw, is 15-pound fluorocarbon. This is 15-pound Berkley 100%. It's a great line. So remember, a lot of similarities with jig fishing. The rod, the reel, the line, a lot of similarities. But unlike the jig, this clatter craw is a little different. It's got a unique action. It's got a unique shape. It's got sound with those rattles. It floats. And of course, remember, it's power bait. So if you want something different, you want a bait that has different appeal, give this clatter craw a try. And by the way, it's available right now on Tackle Warehouse.